Dusty Bibles lead to dirty lives, so I left mine behind after Mama died. I burned her aprons and I broke her jars. Only thing we agreed on was that tears scar. We live in a divided world. Most of us live in comfortable bubbles where our neighbors, our coworkers, and our friends are as similar to us as possible. Conventional wisdom has it that differences create these divides. But what if differences could bridge these divides? I'm a singer-songwriter, writer, and storyteller. I was supposed to be a lawyer. I am the daughter of immigrants. I went to Yale University. I have a master's from the London School of Economics. I was the embodiment of the American dream for my family. So, when I left Goldman Sachs to become a full-time musician, there was only one kind of musician I could be: a rock star. I grappled with stage fright and insecurities, and I strung together gigs in back alley bars. But I couldn't seem to write that hit song that would catapult me to stardom. Instead, I was inspired to write songs about oddballs in history. My journey writing and performing those songs has led me to discover something monumental about differences and connection. I'd like to ask you to take a moment and think about the last time you interacted with someone really different from yourself. How did it go? Did you enter into the conversation wide open, or were you already judging, anticipating what the other person did or did not have to offer? Regularly, I get up on the stage and I try to connect with people I don't know who are potentially very different from me. My fear is always that at the end of a song, there will be silence, or maybe a perfunctory clap or two, or that people will walk out. But the reason that I keep getting back on that stage, that I keep grappling with my own stage fright and insecurities and facing down the expectations of my family and peers, is that sometimes, in transcendent moments, I can sense in the shadows behind the stage lights the tender bodies of my audience breathing with me. And that sensation is sublime. The first time I felt my audience breathe with me was the first time I played a song about an oddball in history. Butte is about a madam at Montana's Dumas brothel, the longest-running bordello in American history. And when my audience breathed with me, I learned something I never expected. Differences can create connection. Took my dowry to Jesse's on the strip. I rented a room with a timer and a bed. Tallied in pencil on peeling walls. Each time my bedposts dug deeper in the floor. Butte is a song about a prostitute. Most of my audiences are not prostitutes. Butte is a song about suicide. Most people don't talk openly about suicide. And Butte was never going to be a hit single. When I wrote it, I was scared to perform it. I thought my audiences would hate it because they'd have nothing to relate to in it. But I had this urge to put the story out into the world. So I had to muster the courage and take the scary leap and put myself out there, not as a potential rock star, but as me, with an unusual song about an untouchable subject. And when I did, my audiences responded as with no other song I had ever written. They came up to me after concerts to tell me how much it meant to them. They bought more of my CDs. I wasn't getting famous, but I was having the sublime and addictive experience of touching other human beings. I wanted more. So when I was inspired by the story of another oddball, I wrote another ordinarily unsung song, this one about a sideshow performer named Todd Robbins who ate light bulbs. Mother swooned when Andy revealed that her missing light bulb was this morning's meal. Tonics and doctors, therapists and quacks, none could keep Andy from metal or glass. The same thing happened. My audiences breathed with me. So I wrote more ordinarily unsung songs, and each time I performed a song about a person on the fringes of their community and completely different from the people in the chairs in front of me, I felt that rush of connection. But I didn't understand what I was experiencing. The songs my audience were responding to most were the songs where the subjects had the least in common with them. Why? After performing these songs for over a decade, I've come to believe that the answer lies in an open secret that writers share. The universal begins in the specific. The universal, that which makes all of us human, begins in the specific details that make us individuals. So the more specifically I can render a story or a subject, the more universally it resonates with my audience. The fascinating details of my subjects' lives, as different as they are from the experiences of the listeners in my audience, tap into something universally human in them. In the case of the song Butte, I wasn't writing about some woman who'd fallen in love and gotten rejected. I was writing specifically about a woman of a certain time who chose, instead of marriage, to become a prostitute and then fell in love with a client. In the case of Andy the light bulb eater, I wasn't writing about some guy who did tricks. I was writing specifically about a born performer who could put a light bulb in his mouth, crush its thin glass with his teeth, and swallow. Crack, crunch, feel it slide, screw, twist, down inside. Crack, crunch, feel it slide, screw, twist, down inside. There is science behind this. Neuroeconomist Paul Zak has shown that when people are exposed to good stories, the brain hormone oxytocin, the cuddle hormone also responsible for empathy, rises significantly. Our brains are wired for story. And specifics, the details that make us different, are the building blocks of a good story. Cognitive scientist Steven Pinker has pointed out that as literacy has increased in the world, violence has declined. Because the more good stories we are exposed to, the larger and more extensive grow the circles of people that we relate to. So the specific details of who we are, our differences, can allow each of us to resonate with one another. Our differences can shrink our divides. Okay, you say, so this works for songs and stories. What about real life? Well, my eureka moment about ordinarily unsung songs led me to try out this theory unwittingly in my real life. It was 2005. I was living in New York City, my birthplace and my home, when I realized I needed time and money to write more of these songs about oddballs. So I applied to a month-long artist residency in New York Mills, Minnesota, a town of 1,000 people in rural, west-central, outstate Minnesota, 1.5 hours from the nearest metropolitan area of Fargo, North Dakota. When I was accepted, I decided to use some of my time to go on a 3-day, 2-night canoe camping trip. And when everyone but the board member leading that trip dropped out, it became a 3-day, 2-night blind date. We fell in love, and I married that board member. So 1 year after I first set foot into the rural American heartland, I moved from New York City to New York Mills. All at once, I was the oddball. At first, I used my differences as a way to maintain the divide between my very different neighbors and myself. It got pretty lonely. So I tried a different approach. I adopted the traits of my neighbors. I learned to knit, to garden, to can jam, to harvest maple syrup, and that was better. But I still wasn't really connecting. You see, I was trying to be somebody else, and then trying to connect from that false, or at least incomplete, version of myself. Which brings me back to my songs about oddballs. So in order to cope with my extreme culture shock, I started writing a memoir about my move from New York City to New York Mills, and in the process, I remembered the lesson I had already learned on the stage. Differences can create connection. I decided to apply that theory to my real life and embrace my differences as a way to connect. I started by writing a column for the local newspaper about everything in rural Minnesota that made absolutely no sense to me. Deer hunting, snowmobiling, the extreme cold, snowmobiling in the extreme cold, and suddenly people were coming up to me on the street asking if I was that New Yorker writing for the paper. When I said yes, they introduced themselves, we started talking, and the next time we saw each other, we talked some more. I stopped hiding my Jewish heritage from my church-going neighbors, and I invited them to Hanukkah parties and Passover seders. They came. And then they invited me to talk about Judaism at school and at church. I finally began to connect with my neighbors only by embracing my differences. I don't believe that differences can create bridges in all situations, but I believe that they can be a way to start connecting. That one by one we can use who we are, the differences that make us individuals, as a way to connect with what makes another person who they are. Through our differences, we can find our shared humanity. Maybe, if we approached our differences with the intention to honor them and even enjoy them, that could be a model for how to bridge the widening gaps in our world. Maybe, instead of using our differences as walls, we could use them as windows. We could learn to be different without being divided. See the beauties in Butte, Montana. They're the prettiest girls I know. Enjoy the beauties in Butte, Montana. Save up your pennies for the show. So I wanted to play one full-length song for you before I left the stage. And the one that seems most appropriate is my song Hold On about Dr. Bronner, the maker of Dr. Bronner's Magic Soap. Who here is familiar with Dr. Bronner's soap? All right. Okay, those of you who aren't may have seen it. These are the soaps in bottles and bars that have labels on them with so much writing in such small print that you can't believe that anyone could have that much to say about soap. And if you were to read them, you would discover that they're not about soap at all. They're about Dr. Bronner's fundamental philosophy that we are all connected. Or in his words, we are all one. Dr. Bronner came to the United States from Germany, and he started preaching this philosophy on street corners, for which he was committed to an insane asylum. He escaped and built a natural soap empire with the goal of spreading the word that we are all connected. For Rabbi Dr. E.H. Bronner, making soap was family honor, till the Germans went after the Jews. He came to the States and got himself arrested for preaching too loud that we're all connected. They locked him in an asylum to change his views. They said, "You're not like us. We don't want to hear your preaching. Don't try to fight us. We've got the might of right behind us." And deep inside himself, he heard a voice say, "Hold on, no, there's nothing left within you except for the voice that says, hold on. We're all one, and you've got what you need within you. Hold on to the voice that says, hold on." Electroshocks to his third escape. He gambled his last 20 for a fare to L.A. In Tinseltown, he found his groove. He slept on the roof of the YMCA. He spent days fighting forest fires for pay and nights mixing soap in his bathtub with a broom. He thought, they won't listen to my preaching. have so much to teach them. How can I tell them what I know? I know. I can write it all down on soap. So he made labels for his soap on which he wrote, "Hold on, oh, there's nothing left within you except for the voice that says hold on. We're hold one, and you got what you need within you. Hold on to the voice that says hold on." To disseminate his philosophy, he built a natural soap company, capitalism, the Bronner way. Leopard print swimsuits at business meetings and soap labels long enough for bathroom reading, socially responsible business with a spiritual say. And now that everyone has Dr. Bronners in their neighborhood, we can all learn how to hold on. No, there's nothing left within you except for the voice that says hold on. We're hold one, and you got what you need within you. Hold on to the voice that says hold on. The voice that says hold on. The voice that says hold on. I invite you to become part of the Differences Connect movement. Burst out of your comfortable bubbles and do something extraordinary. Be someone extraordinary, the someone you already are. And by doing so, allow someone else to be extraordinary with you. Here's how. The next time you're with someone different from yourself, today, this week, this month, take the scary leap. Say something true about who you are, how you feel, a somewhat revealing detail from your past. Step out of judgment and see what happens. It could be the disheartening equivalent of a perfunctory clap or two. The other person might walk out of the room. Or maybe you'll find out that the other person is different, just like you. And that sensation will be sublime.